All right, so we have energy flow in ecosystems, and we're going to start with, I can explain how energy flows through an ecosystem. So energy is not recycled. It is and it's also not created nor destroyed, right? It's only transferred, and it is transferred or flows through an ecosystem as organisms are eaten and eat. So when I eat a carrot, I get the energy from that carrot, and when that carrot gets eaten, it passes the energy to me. And so that's how energy flows. It's just through eating relationships. It's a nice way of saying it. I can explain the concept of the pyramid of energy, numbers, and biomass. I'm actually going to come back to that in a minute. Those really should have been closer to the end. I can discuss, I'm going to put me a little pyramid over here on my drawing. I can discuss the reasons organisms require energy. Well, we need energy for all kinds of stuff. We need it for active transport, mitosis, meiosis. We need it for reproduction. We need tons and tons of energy for reproduction. It takes a lot of energy. Maintaining homeostasis, like for us, keeping that temperature in that narrow range. We talked all about endotherms and ectotherms. We talked about metabolic rate, doing all these chemical reactions. Some of those are endergonic, meaning they absorb energy. They need energy to occur. Again, we talked about endotherms. Endotherms use about 200 times more energy than ectotherms because we are maintaining our homeostasis, our temperature, within a narrow range, and it takes a lot of energy to do that. Ectotherms don't need as much food because they're not maintaining that temperature up there. I can discuss the consequences of energy deficiency. If a population doesn't have enough energy, aka food, some of them are going to starve to death and the population is going to decrease. So you go from having 100 wolves to 75 wolves. Okay, so the population will literally decrease. If an individual doesn't have enough energy, they will first lose mass, they will lose weight, and if they continue to not have enough energy, they will eventually die. Things like reproduction get put on hold as energy levels drop because the body can't afford to spend the energy on reproduction when it's trying to survive. So things like that aren't necessary get put on hold until more energy is available. So the consequences of energy deficiency can be pretty severe. Everything from not reproducing, which is not good because remember our goal is to survive and reproduce, all the way down to not surviving, which obviously is not good. I can explain the progression of trophic levels in a food chain. So when we look in a food chain, I'm trying to find my interactive doohickey here. When we look in a food chain, I don't know if I'm going to get it up on in time or not. We have at the bottom the producers, and they are going to, sorry, I should have had this up before we got started. They're going to be the ones taking the energy. Whoops, cancel. Hold on, just got to think a minute. I'm going to pause this while I set this up so I'm not wasting y'all's time. Maybe. Okay, it's not going to let me pause, but there we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, so what we talk about is I can explain the progression of trophic levels. So we always have a producer at the bottom. The producer is eaten by the primary consumer, and 1 degree is an abbreviation for primary. I'm all about abbreviations. Primary consumer is eaten by the secondary consumer. Again, 2 degree is abbreviation for that, and that is eaten by the tertiary consumer. That could possibly be eaten by the quaternary consumer. It is not quaternary. There's no R. Consumer. I was thinking about that word as I was. So it's quaternary. So there are some R's. There's just not an R here. So it's not quaternary. It's quaternary. Anyway. So that's the progression of energy. So the producers, all of the energy comes in here, generally by photosynthesis, and then that energy moves up the food chain. I can compare autotrophs and heterotrophs in regards to energy acquisition. Autotrophs and heterotrophs both acquire energy. I don't know why my face is frozen, I just realized that. They both acquire energy, but they do it in different ways. Autotrophs are going to gather energy from the sunlight, and so they're going to gather that energy and use it to do photosynthesis. Chemosynthesizers, they're going to gather energy and do a different version of chemosynthesis, whereas heterotrophs have to eat. That's how we acquire our energy. I can contrast heterotrophs and autotrophs in regard to energy acquisition. So I already did that. Autotrophs do it with photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. They make their own food. Heterotrophs do it with by eating, as well as location in the food chain. This is going to be your autotrophs. all the time, every day. These are going to be your heterotrophs. Okay. I can discuss why food chains are limited in length. All right, this is where we're going to get back to that pyramid of numbers, energy, and all that kind of stuff. When we have this producer being eaten by this consumer, only about 10% of the energy, and we'll use a big E for energy, moves up. However much this gets, only about 10% of that energy moves up. Okay, so let's say that the producer had 1,000,000 joules of energy. Let's say it's a big field of grass, okay? The consumer is only going to get about 100,000 or 10% of that energy. The secondary consumer is only going to get about 10,000 joules or 10% of that energy. Then the tertiary consumer is only going to get about 1,000 joules or 10% of this. The quaternary consumer is only going to get about 100 joules or this. The reason that food chains can't keep going up is this consumer needs a certain amount of energy to survive. And if it's not getting enough because of the decrease at each level, it's not worth it to eat. It's going to be better for it to come and eat lower on the food chain where it can get more energy. And so that is one of the reasons that we see food chains are limited in length. They can't keep going up. And this is why we talk about the pyramid of energy, because the base of a pyramid is bigger than the top, just like the amount of energy is bigger than the top. So it's a good visual model, shall we say, of how that energy level decreases as we go up. Also, the other thing that decreases is the numbers. So there's a pyramid of energy. There's a pyramid of numbers, and we're talking about actual population numbers. If you think about it, if I'm a mouse or a cow or whatever, and I'm eating grass, I'm going to need grass today, and I'm going to need more grass tomorrow, but grass doesn't grow that fast. So there has to be more grass than cows or mice or whatever in order for there to be enough to support this consumer. If this is, let's say this is a mouse, and let's say this is a bird that eats, or a snake, we'll go with the snake. I'm going to need a lot of mice to feed these snakes, right? I can't feed the one mouse to one snake for his whole life. He needs more mice than that. And so over time, you're going to see this level needs to be more, needs to have more organisms than the other levels. And then the same thing with biomass. Biomass is dried mass. If I took this grass and I put it in an oven and I dried it out and then I weighed it or I massed it, that's the biomass. If I don't do that, then it's just the weight, okay? You've got to have more biomass down here to support the levels above it, okay? So that biomass, population numbers, and energy are all going to be in this pyramid type shape. Okay, let's get out of this. Okay, so I think my face is still frozen and we just have to deal with that, and that's okay. All right, so the next one says, I can describe the process and importance of primary production. The process is photosynthesis or chemosynthesis, but 99% of the time it's photosynthesis. So let me get down here. The importance of it is where energy enters the ecosystem. And so if there were no primary production, if there were no producers, we would not have any of the rest of the entire ecosystem would collapse, basically. So that's what I'm looking at. So what is it? It is photosynthesis and a little bit of chemosynthesis, and the importance is it is how energy gets into the ecosystem. So yeah, the sunshine's shining all the time, but you and I can't do anything with sunshine. But we can do stuff with the energy we get from the plants and the meat that we eat. And so that's the importance of it, is it converts energy to a form that the rest of the ecosystem can use. I can explain how interruptions in one population of a food chain could impact other organisms in that food chain. So let's go back and look at, let me get a couple things ready while we're going there. Let's go back and look at this. I should have just shrunk it and not closed it. Okay, takes a minute to join the party. But let's think back to a food chain. So in our food chain, I'll be drawing it while I'm talking you through it. In our food chain, we have corn at the bottom, and that corn is eaten by some mice. And then those mice, there we go, are eaten by, I need to focus, are eaten by a snake, okay? And then that snake is eaten by a hawk. All right, what happens if a disease comes and kills all the mice? Well, the corn's going to be happy, right? The corn population is going to go huge because there's plenty of corn. The snakes, however, if this is all they eat, they're going to starve to death. And so you're going to see the snake population drop. Well, then what happens to the hawks? If there's no more snakes, the hawk population drops. Okay, what if we get rid of the snakes? That would be fine with me. Now, I know they do good things. I just don't like them. Okay, if we get rid of the snakes, hawks are going to die because they don't have food. Mice are going to be like, woohoo, no more snakes. We're going to be good. So the mice population is going to increase, which is going to do what to our corn? It's going to cause it to decrease. So one of the things you need to be able to do for the AP exam is you need to be able to think through, if I remove any one, up, down, up, what's that going to do to my other populations? Down, up, down, right? If I remove the corn, everybody dies. So you got to be able to think through, if I get rid of the hawk, that means more snakes means less mice. Less mice means more corn. Okay, so you got to be able to think through that. And then the last thing is I can explain the process of biological magnification. So here's some algae. I'm going to do this really quick. And we may have done this in class. There's my lovely little fish. Okay. Okay, and so DDT is going to be in the water. It gets in the algae. You might hear Micah in the background. He's narrating, I guess, for me. DDT gets into the algae. The fish come and eat the algae. Get a red pen because I feel like that's going to show up better. Okay, so this DDT is a chemical that was sprayed to kill mosquitoes, and whenever it would rain, it would wash down into lakes and ponds, and it would get into the algae. It's also in the water, you know, whatever. Well, fish would eat the algae. So this little fish comes and he eats this little piece of algae right here. Okay. And he comes back tomorrow and he's like, I'm still hungry. Yum, 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 yum. And so he eats another one. Okay. This guy's eating this algae, eats some today, comes back tomorrow, gets another little bit. Okay. And DDT is a cumulative toxin. It accumulates in the fat cells of organisms. And so you don't ever lose your fat cells. And so as it accumulates, the fish just get more and more DDT. So when they come back and eat more, they just get more. If they kept eating, they would have more dots. I'm just going to stop them at 2 days because their life's about to be threatened. All right, then let's say that we have Brutus and, I don't know, I'm trying to think of another like mafia name or something. And they come and they eat these fish. So this guy, we'll call him Marco. It's not really a mafia name. But anyway, he eats this one. And so he gets those 2 DDTs in his fat cells. Okay. And Brutus over here eats this one. Okay. Whoops. And so he gets those 2 little DDTs in his fat cells. But the next day, Marco and Brutus are like, we're hungry again. So they come back and they eat these 2 guys. And so now what you're seeing happen is as you go up the food chain, you're seeing more and more DDT in the ecosystem. Okay, I'll just drop it. Okay, so now a bird comes over, okay, and he eats Brutus, which Brutus looks mean, so I'm not real sad about that. And so he gets those 4 dots in his fat cells. And he comes back tomorrow because he's hungry again, and he eats Marco. Okay, so what you're seeing is as you go up the food chain, we had 2 in the little fish, 4 in the big fish, 8 in the bird. You're seeing the amount of the chemical magnified. You're seeing it increase, and that's biological magnification because not only can energy go up a food chain, but chemicals can as well. And it only matters if they're cumulative toxins. If there's something that the body can break down and get rid of, not a problem. But in this case, it is a problem. And so that's biological magnification in a nutshell. And that's how energy flows in ecosystems. I hope that helps, but if you have any questions, let me know.